NASA's mission is to explore the unknown.
There's more that we don't know than we do know. That's just the nature of the universe.
In the search for answers, it launches its scientists into space, its craft beyond the limits of the solar system.
Taking risks is part of making discoveries. Space exploration is like lighting a match, and we don't know what lurks in the shadows.
Hey, what is that?
There could be anything out there.
Lost recordings capture the moment Apollo astronauts hear unidentified transmissions on the far side of the moon.
I don't know what the hell that was. It's really weird.
A mysterious Russian satellite sparks fears of a space arms race.
Is it a threat to our national security? We want to know what the potential threat could be to us.
And NASA announces the discovery of a new Earth.
There will be predators. There will be creatures moving away from predators.
NASA's missions have uncovered disturbing anomalies.
Okay, we're seeing 3 or 4 objects. No, there are 3 objects.
That continue to perplex our finest scientific minds. These are NASA's Unexplained Files.
Apollo 10, 2 minutes, LOS.
Apollo 10 loses contact with mission control and encounters an unidentified radio signal.
I don't know what the hell that was. It's really weird.
There was something there.
When the mission returns to Earth, all records of the incident are classified.
The tapes reveal conversations between the astronauts about a phenomenon that they did not report to mission control.
What the hell happened? I don't know.
May 18th, 1969. Apollo 10 prepares for launch from the Kennedy Space Center.
40 seconds and counting. Tom Stafford making a final check with his computer.
Apollo 10 basically ran a dress rehearsal for Apollo 11's lunar landing.
Launch commit. Liftoff. We have liftoff.
They did everything Apollo 11 would do short of landing on the moon's surface. This was the most complicated mission to date.
Apollo 10, this is Houston. You're halfway, over.
Apollo 10 enters lunar orbit. As they pass around the far side of the moon, the astronauts lose all contact with Earth.
It's about an hour on the backside of the moon, away from Earth, where you lose radio contact.
During this hour, the astronauts are on their own. No one on Earth can see or hear them. When they emerge, they seem to have survived their voyage around the far side unscathed.
Houston, you can tell the world that we have arrived.
As far as anyone on Earth knows, this mission is going like clockwork. Everything according to plan. There's nothing irregular going on at all.
But nearly 4 decades later, lost recordings emerge revealing an unsettling incident on the far side of the moon.
There are recorders that record whatever's going on the backside, and then you do a data dump when you come around the front side. And Houston or Mission Control then can see what happened when you were around the backside.
After the NASA astronauts return to Earth,
Roger, Houston, we are returning to the Earth. Over.
NASA transcribes the tapes, then buries them in the archives without comment.
These conversations are recorded in the transcripts, but those transcripts were classified.
NASA would withhold information from the public if they thought it was in the public's best interest.
Even after declassification, the transcripts lay undiscovered in the NASA archives until 2008.
Finding record of this conversation is like finding a needle in a haystack. It takes years to come to light.
The tapes contain recordings of strange, otherworldly music coming through the Apollo module's radio. The conversations that follow the sounds makes it clear they are unlike anything the astronauts have ever heard.
I didn't mean to even sound outer spacey, didn't it? Do you hear that? That whistling sound?
In their headsets, it sounded like a woo-woo kind of a noise.
Sounds like, outer space-time music.
If I were to hear something back there, the first thing probably would freak me out.
Boy, that sure is weird music.
Over the course of an hour, they mention it multiple times. This is not just some anomaly. This is something that they're all really hearing, and it's really weird.
The astronauts struggle to identify the cause of the strange sounds.
The sounds that the astronauts heard could not be coming from the planet Earth because they're on the far side of the moon, out of contact with the Earth.
I'll tell you, God, that music is really weird. I know it. No one will believe it.
This was the far side of the moon. For all they knew, anything could have been down there. Could this be an alien signal? Is that what we're hearing?
After almost an hour of transmission, the sound stops.
Boy, it got quiet, didn't it?
Before they re-enter radio contact with Earth, the astronauts discuss whether to report their experience to Mission Control. The Apollo 10 sounds remain a mystery for decades, until another NASA probe uncovers a possible clue to their nature.
The Cassini spacecraft picked up broadcasts like this from Saturn.
These noises, some of them are really weird. They even sound, under some conditions, like strange alien speech.
For the sounds from Saturn, there is a scientific explanation.
These are caused by charged particles moving through Saturn's magnetic environment.
Imagine being on the backside of the moon all alone, away from the Earth, and hearing these kinds of sounds. I can understand how they could have been unnerved.
But the unsettling noises the Apollo 10 astronauts heard could not be caused by magnetic field.
The moon doesn't have an atmosphere or a magnetic field, so we wouldn't expect it to be making any transmissions that could be picked up on a radio.
Since the sounds can't be from the moon, NASA's radio technicians come up with their own theory.
The radios in the two spacecraft were interfering with each other. They were on VHF, and there was a bit of radio interference, and that was the source of the sound.
But Apollo astronaut Al Warden doesn't agree with the radio theory.
The Apollo 10 crew is very used to the kind of noise that they should be hearing. Logic tells me that if there was something recorded on there, then there was something there.
Botch, I don't know what the hell that was, babe.
The Apollo 10 astronauts never publicly discussed what they heard.
If you're an astronaut and you start hearing these strange sounds, what are you going to do? They were all absolutely petrified of being grounded if there was even the slightest question mark over their state of mind. So what did? They stayed silent.
To date, the origin of the noises mentioned in the Apollo 10 recordings remains a mystery.
I suspect there's a very, very clear cause of what they heard on Apollo 10, which maybe we haven't uncovered yet. I just think we don't understand it.
Still to come, an amateur astronomer spots a strange disturbance in the Martian atmosphere.
This is something that no one had ever seen around Mars.
To create a structure this large, something big happened here.
An amateur astronomer sees something enormous emerging from the surface of the red planet.
Over 150 miles. Now that's 25 times the altitude of Mount Everest.
Nobody knows what it is.
We've actually seen something we're simply not supposed to be seeing.
March 19th, 2012. Amateur astronomer Wayne Jaski is photographing Mars from his home-built observatory when he makes an unsettling discovery.
I was planning on taking pictures of Mars, and I was looking at the image of Mars on the screen, and something didn't appear to be quite right. I see a spot on the planet that wouldn't really focus.
Wayne's first instinct is that it's a glitch in the system.
I checked the telescope, I tried to realign the mirrors, I tried to refocus. Still something didn't seem quite right.
To rule out the possibility this thing is the product of a technical error, he sets the telescope to record high-definition images overnight.
The next day after I processed the data, I'm seeing a strange feature. I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking to myself, this can't be real. But I'm looking at it over and over again, and it is real. It's there. It rotates with the planet, and it's above the limb of the planet, but it shouldn't be there.
If you can see this thing from hundreds of millions of miles away, it had to be enormous.
Wayne shares the images online, where the mystery draws the attention of NASA astronomers.
Astronomers are completely puzzled. We do not know what's going on here. To have this feature in the skies of Mars is completely baffling.
Wayne's pictures send the world of astronomy into meltdown.
There are news organizations calling me. There's websites covering this. It's all over the world. And then the theories start to come out.
One scientist suggests the strange apparition could be the product of an aurora, a light show produced by a planet's magnetic field.
We can see auroral activity on the Earth. We can see it with our naked eye.
It can be green or blue or red, and it is caused by particles that are trapped from the solar wind coming and interacting with the Earth's magnetic field.
Auroras have been seen in this area of Mars before, but there's a problem with this theory. No aurora on record has ever reached 150 miles above the surface of the red planet.
So what we see now is not that, we see something else.
Several of the astronomers looking into the mystery suggest this thing could be some kind of giant cloud, perhaps made of Martian dust.
On Mars, dust storms occur. Pretty large dust storms that can, once in a while, cover the whole planet.
The dust on Mars is exceptionally fine, and even in the rarefied atmosphere, winds can whip it up into huge dust devils.
Is the cloud an enormous Martian twister?
Professional astronomers calculated that it was approximately 150 miles above the surface of Mars, maybe 600 miles long. We know it was absolutely gigantic.
The object is too high to be a Martian dust cloud.
The atmosphere on Mars is so thin that the fine dust can't get very high. It's just not thick enough. The atmosphere is not thick enough to hold it up, so it falls right down again.
What unknown force could throw Martian dust so high into the atmosphere?
I think the only solution for this is that it had to have been an impact. That's a very effective way of setting stuff up very high, as close to the asteroid belt, so you know that impacts must occur.
Experts predict one massive asteroid impact on Mars every 3 years. The impact theory seems to be the best explanation for Jayski's anomaly, until scientists analyze its chemical composition.
So when you want to try to understand the composition of an object in space, what's commonly done is spectroscopy. You're going to measure the sunlight that's reflected off of that object.
The results blow the dust cloud theory apart.
This cloud was rich in water.
Just like Earth, Mars has a weather system.
This is a water cloud, and there are other water clouds on Mars. It seemed like this was case closed.
But again, this vast anomaly is simply too high for the explanation to fit. Water doesn't get that high.
There was a problem with this water cloud, and that was the altitude. At 150 miles of altitude, there was no way that this could be just your ordinary water cloud.
We don't have clouds on Earth 150 miles above the surface of the planet. We have the International Space Station and satellites and the Hubble Space Telescope.
If the water doesn't come from Mars, could it come from somewhere else?
It might be a comet that exploded high up in the Martian atmosphere. That's something that we've actually observed in the atmosphere of Jupiter.
The water cloud might be evidence of a similar event on Mars.
Comets can break up. They are made mostly of water ice, and they will release wherever they break up. So in other words, it's not water vapor that came from below, it's water vapor that came from above.
The theory seems to fit perfectly, except for one thing. There is no evidence for a large comet entering the Martian atmosphere at the time of the cloud's appearance.
There's a lot of theories about what this could be. We have no idea whether it's some sort of natural phenomena or something else. We simply have no idea what it is.
Still to come, cameras on the International Space Station capture footage of 3 unidentified flying objects.
They have wings, they have appendages, and it looks like these wings are actually flapping.
This is incredible.
The live feed on the ISS captures 3 mysterious objects leaving Earth's atmosphere.
This is highly unusual. The movement of the projections on the side of the objects looks like wings.
Within seconds of the object's appearance, the video cuts out.
What happened to the cameras? What is it that we aren't seeing after we lose the video?
200 miles above the Earth, there are eyes looking down on us. The crew of the International Space Station live an isolated existence in an alien environment. It is an experience that nothing on Earth can prepare you for. June 2015. On the International Space Station, NASA astronaut Scott Kelly is preparing for the arrival of the 7th SpaceX Dragon resupply mission. Outside the ISS, 4 high-definition cameras keep a constant vigil over nearby space. The live video feed picks up something the astronauts inside are unaware of.
At first you just see this one dot moving across the frame that sort of twinkles, but then there's another one, and another one.
And then they start moving, and suddenly you realize, well, wait a minute, there's something really bizarre going on here.
Moments after the objects appear, NASA's live feed cuts out.
What's happened to the cameras? What is it that we're not seeing after we lose the video?
With no explanation from NASA, interest in the footage explodes across the internet.
When you see this video initially, you see these objects moving up into space. There's flickering, there's movement. It's very convincing.
Here's the weird thing about it. They had wing-shaped appendages that looked like they were flapping.
The bizarre flying movement of these mysterious objects earns them the online name of space angels. For some observers, the sighting reminds them of a strange incident on one of the ISS's predecessors, the Salyut 7 space station.
In 1984, cosmonauts Leonid Kizim and Oleg Atkov were on board the Salyut 7 space station when they reportedly saw something orange outside the spacecraft. In a panic, they both thought it was a fire and rushed to the window to see what was outside. And this is where the story gets a little weird.
The cosmonauts report seeing what they describe as colossal winged humanoid entities hovering just outside the station.
At first, this was dismissed as a hallucination caused maybe by overwork or by shortage of oxygen to the brain. But then when the replacement crew came on board, the same thing happened. And on this occasion, all 6 of them saw these strange winged humanoid figures out there in the void of space.
Back on Earth, the cosmonauts are subjected to rigorous psychological evaluation and are all given a clean bill of health.
This is a multiply witnessed, multiple corroborated sighting of strange-looking figures outside the Salyut space station. So it can't just be an optical illusion.
The winged creatures from the Salyut 7 sighting remain unexplained for more than 30 years. NASA does not believe that the so-called space angels in the footage are the same phenomenon witnessed by the cosmonauts. For some, a more plausible explanation for the wings is that they could be the solar panels of a satellite.
There are about 1,300 satellites in orbit today. They come in all shapes and sizes, from a laptop up to the size of a Greyhound bus. Pretty much all of them use solar energy, and the big ones tend to use the long solar wings which extend from each side of the satellite.
Intriguingly, solar panels can cause an orange glow similar to what the Salyut 7 cosmonauts described.
I mean, the sun hitting the solar panels to just have this thing glow like in a campfire. And then the stark darkness of the blackness of space contrasted with these modules and the solar rays. It's just incredible to see that.
The satellite theory does not satisfy everyone.
Now, if these are solar panels deploying on another satellite, solar panels deploy very, very slowly. Rapidly flapping wings could not be the solar panels deploying on another satellite.
One theory to explain the apparent flapping of the space angels is that it could be debris flickering in the unusual light conditions of space.
Here's the flickering object. Now, it flickers because of a clash between recording speed and the fact that the object's actually rotating in space. Many objects do this. They will spin and spin and spin in space, and there's nothing to stop them. And people often confuse them with alien spacecraft, when in fact, they're just small objects outside the window or moving away from the spacecraft.
Critics of the space debris explanation point out that the objects appear to be heading upwards.
Another odd thing about the space angels is that these things look like they're coming up from planet Earth. Not out from outer space, but up. What are they doing coming up from planet Earth? The objects go higher in space because we're seeing an illusion. The International Space Station is actually receding from the objects, leaving them behind in its orbit. And as it goes down in its curved orbit, the objects will appear to go higher in the sky. That creates the illusion.
Without further evidence, it is impossible to provide a definitive explanation for the space angel phenomenon. Up next, when Russia launches a mystery object into orbit, NASA investigates.
Is it a threat to our national security? We want to know what the potential threat could be to us.
An unidentified object in Earth's orbit starts stalking Russian spacecraft.
If a mysterious object suddenly appears in space and then starts maneuvering as if it's under directed control, people are going to start asking a lot of questions.
The disturbing appearance sparks fears of a space arms race.
When something like this happens, NASA is definitely going to be concerned.
Today, space is the frontier for human exploration, but there are other craft in the darkness. Some serve a sinister purpose. May 23rd, 2014. The Russian Space Agency announces it is launching 3 satellites.
Generally speaking, everybody who launches a spacecraft tells everyone else what they're doing.
It's the only way that you can ensure safety of the launch and the safety of the other country so that there's no difficulty or collision.
The satellites, numbered 2496 to 2498, are part of the Russian Cosmos series.
The Cosmos satellites are a Russian series of military communication satellites. They're used to relay messages from ships at sea and ground forces back to their base.
Space enthusiasts across the globe tracking the 3 new satellites see something totally unexpected. A 4th object appearing in Earth's orbit.
So when Russia launches 3 satellites and acknowledges that and tells everybody, and then does a 4th, it's not only mysterious and concerning, it could be potentially dangerous.
At first, amateurs assumed that the mystery object is space junk.
You do get plenty of space junk which comes from the launchers and from operations in orbit, but this is unusual. It seems to be moving in a fixed fashion.
The U.S. Department of Defense begins to track the 4th object. To their amazement, it starts to move like it has a mind of its own.
This isn't a weather satellite or a communication satellite. Those don't maneuver very much.
If you have an object that shows up in space that is clearly under intelligent control, you're going to have a lot of people asking questions about what's going on.
The mystery deepens when the object then seems to rendezvous with other Russian spacecraft.
If in fact the Russians have very maneuverable spacecraft, satellite or otherwise, that can change orbit, that can go to other satellites, there are a lot of possibilities on what that could accomplish, all the way from being a repair station or a refueling station for other satellites.
Despite repeated requests for information, the Russians refuse to comment on the unidentified object.
Part of the Russian rules are to deny everything and admit nothing.
The Russians aren't saying anything. They say, go home, nothing to see here.
I never believe them when they say that. You know, I don't believe anything that they say anyway, so I feel like it's something that we always have to look into.
The West faces the alarming prospect that the unidentified object could be a new breed of space weapon.
The idea of anti-satellite weaponry is old. It goes back to when satellites were first developed. If somebody's going to put up a satellite, somebody else is going to say, well, we'll take it out.
You don't need James Bond laser beams to kill satellites. You need other satellites to kill satellites. Things in orbit are actually moving quite fast. And to destroy something in orbit, all you have to do is put something in front of something else.
If Russia's mystery object is a satellite killer, it could mark the beginning of a space arms race.
For one of the great powers to destroy the satellites of another major power would be a really dramatic act, and be the precursor to something major and dangerous. If it happened during a time of escalating tensions, it could be the prelude to war.
Russia's military intervention in the Ukraine has raised tensions with the West to their highest level since the Cold War. And deployment of a space weapon would violate a major international treaty.
Every major space power has signed up to the Outer Space Treaty, which bans the development of weaponry in space. That doesn't mean that it can't be done secretly.
After 7 months of increasing pressure from the West, Russia finally breaks its silence. They claim the object is nothing more than a university experiment.
At first, Russia doesn't even acknowledge it. Then they say it's doing peaceful university science. Well, why didn't they say that when it was launched?
It could be a spy satellite. It could have abilities to inspect things on the ground or other objects in space that we don't know about.
The Russian object gets the name Cosmos 2499. If it does have any offensive capabilities, they remain hidden.
Russia rarely tells you the truth, it seems, and if they do, it's to their benefit.
Coming up, a NASA probe in the outer reaches of the solar system disappears without explanation.
Everybody is completely in disaster mode.
You can imagine the tension.
The clock is ticking. We have to fix this problem.
As NASA's New Horizons probe approaches the dwarf planet Pluto, mission control loses contact.
We lost all communications with the spacecraft in a period of about a second and a half.
Now, NASA must fight to save the $700 million mission.
The whole mission could be over in the blink of an eye.
NASA plans its missions of exploration in extraordinary detail. But there are things in the darkness that no human can anticipate. July 4th, 2015. NASA's New Horizons space probe is just 10 days away from Pluto and 3 billion miles away from Earth. Its mission is to photograph Pluto's surface, collecting new data about this mysterious dwarf planet.
The New Horizons project is the first time that humankind has explored Pluto and the Kuiper Belt.
It's all coming to this moment after 9.5 years of flight and who knows how many years of development before that. So this is right down to the wire.
New Horizons Mission Control is preparing for the spacecraft's flyby of the unexplored world when it suddenly goes quiet.
I got a phone call from my project manager, and he called me to say, Alan, we've lost contact with the spacecraft. That should never happen.
The out-of-lock message on the computer screen means they are getting no data from the spacecraft. Something has happened to New Horizons on the approach to Pluto.
It's about the worst thing that can happen in a space mission, because if you can't communicate with it, then you can't even begin to diagnose and solve the problem.
Unless a solution is found, this could be the end of the mission.
Over 15 years of hard work could all be for nothing. No communication means no data.
10 days before the flyby and only 3 days before the flyby data collection is to begin, we're presented with the biggest emergency in the mission. And the clock is ticking. We can't delay the flyby.
NASA's experts call a series of crisis meetings. They suspect the issue lies with the probe's onboard computers.
They eventually narrow it down to two possibilities, one of which is that the main computer has rebooted itself, which is something that has actually happened on board the spacecraft before, so it's not impossible.
But a simple reboot doesn't explain the continued loss of communication.
The second scenario was that the spacecraft actually sensed that something was wrong on board and did what it was supposed to do. It shut down the primary computer and turned everything over to the backup computer.
If this is what's happened to New Horizons, it's the first time in 9.5 years of going all the way from the Earth out to Pluto. Very scary.
If the probe has switched itself over to its backup computer and into safe mode, the whole mission is now in jeopardy.
In safe mode, the only thing the spacecraft does is take care of itself. It doesn't collect any science, any images or spectra or other data types. It doesn't point the payload, the cameras and things at Pluto and its satellites. It's only taking care of itself.
The probe is effectively useless and is still hurtling toward Pluto at 32,000 miles an hour. But there is one glimmer of hope.
If the backup computer had in fact taken over, it would be using a slightly different radio frequency and transmission rate.
Using NASA's Deep Space Network radio antenna, the team searches for the New Horizons backup signal.
Then at 11 minutes past 3 p.m., one word comes up on the screen and it says locked, and that means that the dish has found New Horizons and it's speaking to the spacecraft again.
But the team still has no idea what happened to New Horizons out in space to cause the problem. Diagnostic tests eventually revealed the issue.
It seems that the spacecraft was getting very confused. The computers were trying to do all sorts of things and save stuff to memory and send communications around, and it just crashed down. It's a bit like having too many windows open on your computer and it just freezes.
Theoretically, New Horizons can operate on just the backup computer, but Mission Control doesn't want to take that gamble.
The team decides to reconfigure New Horizons to put everything back onto the main computer, because this is the computer that's been running the mission for 9.5 years, and it's the computer that they know.
The reconfiguration will mean shutting down the computer and losing contact with the probe again, this time for 1 hour and 15 minutes. Time is now their enemy.
Even at the speed of light, our radio signals take 4.5 hours from the Earth to reach Pluto. And when the spacecraft responds, it takes another 4.5 hours.
So the team is working really quickly to try to get this up, knowing that it's going to be 9 hours before they get that confirmation back from New Horizons that the command has actually worked.
My mission operations manager estimated that that was several weeks of work at a normal pace. But we had to do it under the gun in only a matter of days, and do it right or miss Pluto.
Now, New Horizons is so close to Pluto, all the team can do is hope their plan has worked.
Waiting to see that this has actually worked is extremely stressful for the team in the Mission Operations Center.
3 days after New Horizons first disappeared, the moment of truth arrives.
At 10:21 Tuesday morning, the spacecraft comes back online. It's sending data back down to the Earth. And this huge moment of relief for the team as everything comes back online and everything's working well again.
Our mission operations team never made a single misstep in putting this all back together and getting it set up. And they engaged the flyby timeline with just 3 hours to go.
The results of New Horizons flyby are mind-blowing, revealing beautiful, never-before-seen imagery of this stunning dwarf ice planet at the very outer reaches of our solar system.
So in the end of the day, we mapped the Pluto system, Pluto and all of its moons, in exquisite detail.
The mission's leader, Principal Investigator Alan Stern, called it the team's Apollo 13 moment. Everyone came together, and it really was their finest hour.
We traveled at a speed of over 35,000 miles an hour for 9.5 years and arrived at our target at only 97 seconds early after a 9.5-year journey. That's sharpshooting.
Coming up, NASA makes an astonishing announcement. A planet eerily similar to Earth,
I can't believe how exciting this is. This actually might be it.
where life may take on strange new forms.
They live underground. They come out at night. They would be shorter, be stockier. They'd be stronger than we were.
NASA discovers an uncannily Earth-like planet.
This news is electrifying. When NASA's calling something Earth 2.0, you know it's something big.
The discovery could answer some of the greatest questions in science.
It gives us a snapshot for what our planet might look like in the distant future.
But if this is the future of our world, it is grim.
Understand that this is a world that is now dying. Its time is limited.
The light from distant stars can take centuries to reach us. To look at any of them is to gaze into the distant past. Opportunities to see into the future are rare. November 12, 2009. 8 months into its mission to explore our galaxy for Earth-like planets, the Kepler Space Telescope spots a dip in the brightness of the star known only as Kepler 452.
You can't jump up and down yet because it takes hundreds of hours of what we call validation. You need to rule out every other possibility before you can be certain that that little drop in brightness is caused by a planet and it's not some kind of fake signal.
All indications suggest Kepler has discovered a new world.
So many times when I've been on the brink of a major discovery, we search every last possibility, and then it turns out to be nothing. In this case, actually, it held true.
NASA announces the discovery of the new planet. From the outset, it is clear that this is no ordinary world. First, there's its location.
Kepler 452b sits right in the habitable zone, what we call the Goldilocks zone. Not too warm, not too cold, not too bright, not too dark. Just right for life.
Excitement mounts when further analysis reveals 452b could have a potentially breathable atmosphere.
With those temperatures in that atmosphere, it could actually be suitable for liquid water on the surface.
And when scientists factor in the light from Kepler 452, it becomes clear that this is the most Earth-like world humanity has ever discovered.
The light from the parent star is much like the light from our own star. Has the same mixture of colors. So photosynthesis of plants like the ones here on Earth would probably be just fine. You could probably take a plant from Earth, move it to that planet, and it would grow just fine. Plant life means that there could be oxygen. Oxygen means that there could be life like ours.
The incredible combination of liquid water, light, and temperature suitable for life inspires NASA to give planet Kepler 452b a new name, Earth 2.0.
This news is electrifying. When NASA's calling something Earth 2.0, you know it's something big.
Kepler 452b is the closest we have to anything like Earth yet.
Earth 2.0 appears to have every ingredient necessary for life. But because of the planet's stronger gravity, life could take unusual forms.
This planet is much more massive than Earth, so consequently the gravity would be doubled. The creatures would respond to it in a very interesting way. To them, it would be normal. To us, it would be labor, like we had cement in our shoes walking over the surface of this planet. But through evolution, they would adapt. They would be shorter. They'd definitely be stockier. They'd be stronger than we were. They would look very different than us as humans. So if we stood in the middle of them, we would stand out in the crowd, and they'd always refer to us as the tall creatures from Earth.
Communicating with our cousins from Earth 2.0 could be difficult.
We dream of creatures looking like us that we can communicate back and forth like Star Trek. Come on, everybody either has lumps on their nose or pointy ears, but they speak English. But the reality is there's no reason that we would have the same capability to communicate. Come on, whales have bigger brains, bigger thinking areas than humans. When's the last time you spoke to a whale?
Astonishingly, this world could provide a glimpse of our own future.
Kepler 452b orbits around a star very similar to our sun, but it's 1.5 billion years older than ours. It is sending out 10% more heat than it did 1.5 billion years ago if it was the same age as our sun.
The future for life on Earth 2.0 and ultimately our own world is grim.
Understand that this is a world that is now dying. A lot of creatures have disappeared off the surface of this planet, but the ones that survive are hardy, and they've learned to adapt. They live underground. They search for water. This is a big part of their life if they're built anything like we are here on Earth. To us, this world at this point might almost look like the Sahara Desert.
We can only hope that any inhabitants of Earth 2.0 find a way to escape their fate.
Kepler 452b is 1,400 light years away. We're not going there anytime soon, if ever. And as far as life on that planet might be concerned, well, it's just going to remain a mystery for a while.
More than 4 decades after the first voyage around the far side of the moon, there are sights and sounds that continue to defy explanation. Even our closest planetary neighbors are constantly throwing up fresh mysteries. Humanity's conflicts create new threats above our own world. And NASA's exploration of the stars offers a vision of a future that could one day be ours.